My eyes strained, and the world around me seemed to be spinning off of its axis. But I hardly noticed. I was too engaged in digesting this information in front of me. It all felt so authentic, but was simply an apparition. Nothing riveting was around me. In fact, I was in my bed, curled up alone with the TV dead. But I would have vowed I was there. It would have crossed my heart that I was helplessly observing Miles, sobbing by Alaska's grave after what seemed to be the most tragic car accident to ever occur. Except it was all artificial. It was a made-up illusion in my head, fabricated by the bewitching words of John Green. Looking for Alaska was the first book I ever read that I was completely infatuated with. After drying my tears and reflecting the non-existent roller coaster I just climbed, I couldn't help but contemplate how absurd I was behaving. Why were candid scribbles on a page affecting me so substantially? In reality, everything you've ever read is just another combination of 26 letters. So why is this combination so superior to reading about the process of photosynthesis? At that time, all I was sure about was that I wanted to feel this way again about another book, and that I knew that books were my passion, my bliss. By books, I don't mean hearing mediocre stories that may seize my attention for a second, but the way you feel after living through a tale so intense and purposeful that it changes the wiring of your brain. To me, books represent humanity. The way we feel so emotionally bonded to a fictitious character. The way you're so engrossed in an alternative world, you scowl when this character scowls, blink when they blink, yawn when they yawn, and smirk when they smirk. The way you read a line so dramatic you have to close the book and just stare at the wall for a minute. Our ability to care so deeply for something is the source of humanity. It weaves its way into our minds, clouding our judgment and sense, and for that I'm forever grateful. What is a world without hope, pride, passion, determination, love, elation, melancholy, or even hate? With that being said, this essay, in reality, is a piece of amateur writing created for the sole purpose of possibly obtaining an A on another overrated attempt for teachers to get to know us better or to help us discover who we really are. So just keep in mind that I do in fact realize that you will be watching over 43 hours of essays identical to mine, and the inevitability of mine being quickly looked over is the most realistic outcome. Therefore, anything I say isn't going to mean much, but I want you to try and understand that I'm not trying to persuade you to hop in your cars, buses, bikes, etc. to the nearest Barnes & Noble in hopes of finding a book, preferably less than 300 pages, with a couple pictures tossed in, maybe worth your time. That's just not how it works. Bliss doesn't come from contempt, but from sheer and utter happiness. And to me, that's not something you can force. Others say that their bliss comes from hitting a game-winning home run, so they pay $100 for weekly baseball lessons and hope they will receive some rare sense of pride or appreciation from their team or overbearing parents. While so focused on the dream that you, being the underdog, will be hoisted up by your shocked teammates and carried to the nearest pizza parlor, reliving your 30 seconds of fame. You forgot all the hard work you put in. You forgot your aching and overused body, the letter being sent to your mom explaining how you're failing 5 of your classes because who needs school when you're the next Jackie Robinson? Or how hard your parents work just to pay for your lessons. Is it really worth all that just for the rare feeling of bliss? While some of you just fell off your high horses, just hear me out. To me, bliss isn't something you push. While everything you work for requires effort, it shouldn't have so many consequences. Bliss is a born passion. Going back to my personal bliss of books and my failed attempt of to joke about picking the perfect read, a few questions are posed. Practically the most point-blank one of them all, what makes a book good? It's really quite simple. As I said before, my bliss really comes from the emotions associated with reading, but it's more than just feeling happy when the guy gets the girl or sad when he breaks her heart. It's about enhancing the 5 senses. Stephanie Meyer said, "You live 1,000 lives when you read 1,000 books," which is the whole synopsis of reading. When you crack open a book, it should be synonymous to climbing into a time machine and being swept away to a new dimension, no matter how absurd it may be. Your true body becomes catatonic while you possess Katniss Everdeen or Harry Potter. You should be absorbed. You'll feel the rage and loss rip you apart as poor Rue lays dead at your hands in the ironically peaceful meadow. You should feel your throat constrict and your tongue parch as you watch the previously vivacious spark drain from her eyes. You should smell the metallic scent of fresh blood leaking out from her limp body. You should hear the all too familiar boom of another fallen tribute. You should taste the salty, wet tears as they stream down your face and into your mouth, which is wide open from your ear-splitting sobs. You forget you're actually sitting on a bus by 75 oblivious people and begin to wipe your embarrassing tears. Anyway, I'm sure I'm boring you to tears by now, but I want you to try to look at this essay from a different point of view. Getting lost in a book sounds easy enough, but how do authors develop such consuming stories? Well, obviously, it's portrayed perfectly in the movies. The insecure scholar sits hunched over in his rusted, overused typewriter, surrounded by failed attempts of paper balls littering around his already full trash can. He sits in a damp, musty room at the peak of a lighthouse, at the shore of a bay, as rain pours and lightning strikes. His head slowly bangs on the table as he calls for his henchman to pour him another glass of whiskey to drown his sorrows in. Just kidding. Every writer takes a different route to inspiration. Hemingway, for example, was infamous for writing 500 words a day, though he knew when to stop. He wrote one masterpiece to 90 pages of garbage. In fact, 70% of the American authors that have won Nobel Peace Prize were indeed alcoholics, including John Steinbeck. The leading cause, of course, was depression, which only reinforces my initial claim that books are all about emotion, including the depression injected from authors. Let's take a break from books and bliss and just talk about science. If you stub your toe on that forever pesky drawer, you don't feel pain in your toe, but in your brain. Sure, it's the injured nerves in your toe that are throbbing, but it's those same nerves that send signals to your brain telling you you're hurt. According to NPR, your brain is like a radio. Depending on how severe the pain is, you can say, hey, let's turn that up and pay some more attention. Or, no thanks, turn that down. I don't really care for that. But what's even cooler is that there's a completely different part of the brain responsible for emotions. Positive emotions, like feeling calm and safe, minimize pain, and negative emotions have the opposite effect. Torturers have used this knowledge for years, and by torturers, I obviously mean authors. For years, authors have exploited this part of the brain by killing off harmless, undeserving characters in hope of dragging out some of our emotions. However, it's up to us to determine how much we are willing to feel. We choose how much we want to be affected. Have you ever confused a dream with a past event? Have you ever listened to your parents tell the new neighbors the same embarrassing story about your sister wetting her pants at her first sleepover so many times you feel like you were actually there watching her cheeks turn crimson? That's because your brain isn't able to distinguish the two. With enough details, you're as gullible as your 6-year-old cousin after a visit from the tooth fairy. Okay, just hang on tight. We're almost done. While at first a painful process, I have surprisingly learned a lot. For starters, everyone is entitled to their own beliefs, including their own bliss. A couple of months ago, when I interviewed my parents and asked them what their idea of bliss was, 2 out of 2 answered, being around family, or watching the birth of your firstborn. At first, I was slightly offended, considering I was the second-born, but realized that was the standard response for all of my 180 classmates. While it seemed cliche at first, it later became clear that we had the same idea. Everyone enjoys something, but it's not family they enjoy, but relishing in the fact that they have succeeded in raising a child who is not pregnant or in prison for their freshman year. We are humans. We like to feel stuff. So once again, I'm not persuading you to morph into Gandhi and discover your inner bliss, but to contemplate things that change you or challenge you. Books don't change people. Paragraphs do. Sometimes even sentences.